Hey, what's going on? It's Quinn David Furness. Welcome to the Beantown Podcast for August 18th, 2019. What's going on? How are you? My name's Quinn. This is my show. Director, producer, editor, key grip, and of course, best boy. And also hair and makeup, right? Cuts by Q. Don't forget about that. This actually came up. I was hanging out with Tarek Shahada last night at his apartment. You guys know him from the local Glow podcasts, and we were fortunate enough to have him on a couple episodes ago. But he was asking me, okay, so what exactly is Cuts by Q? And I did this big reveal. You know, I took off my Beantown Podcast limited edition collector's item edition hat, and I revealed, my flowing locks, which had just been given a fresh cut by Q the previous morning. Actually, that morning, I think, or the night before, I don't know. Friday night, I did it after work. So if you're wondering, Cuts by Q is my barbershop, boutique, salon, hairstylist, mani-pedi, whatever you want to call it. It's my company, support small business. It's in the name, Cuts by Q. That's me, Quinn David Furness, and this is my show, Quinn David Furness Presents the Beantown Podcast, one of the better podcasts on the north side of Chicago, and your number one source for misleading information far and wide, and you can trust me on that. Listener discretion is advised when you're listening to the Beantown Podcast. Number one, we'll occasionally use some, it's going to be football-related language today, but, even in the game of football, occasionally tensions get high, and the vulgarity just seeps through. We'll maybe get a little taste of that later when we have the commissioner himself. One of the leagues I play in, one of two, is commissioned by, is that the right word? Commissioned? Commandeered by the man himself, Hunter Bolin, who will be, did I say Boland, like Dave Boland? Hunter Bolin will be making, I believe, his Beantown Podcast debut, and he's going to get us ready for fantasy football this year. We're going to fantasize about some football, and I think you're going to like it. But first, because I completely forgot to do this last week, and the three of you who are listening were probably like, wait, where is this segment? Because 2 weeks ago, we introduced a new segment called How's the Weather Over There? And we had a friend of the podcast, Matthew Fiedler, give a little weather update from Colorado. Last week, the plan was, and we had the audio file, it was right there, to have John Paul Pandowski, friend of the podcast, who did our NBA draft sort of reaction recap special a couple months ago before he went to a summer program where he was learning some German. So live from now with our recurring segment, our second time, with the weather report from Middlebury, Vermont. Is it Bury? How do you say it? I don't know. Is John Paul Pandowski. Take it away.
Guten Morgen von Middlebury, Vermont. Heute wird meist bewölkt. Die Höchsttemperatur wird bei 69 Grad liegen. Heute Nacht wird es teilweise bewölkt und die Tiefstemperatur wird bei 50 Grad liegen. Der Sonnenaufgang war um 10 vor 6 und der Sonnenuntergang wird gegen 20 Uhr. Die Feuchtigkeit liegt bei 66% und die Luftqualität ist gut. Schönen Tag und auf Wiedersehen.
I started eating some berries while JP was giving that weather report. They're good berries. I've been a big fan, so my local market recently has been getting some clutch prices on blueberries, and it's that one kind of cut in half, but blueberries are great. They got antioxidants, which I don't really understand what an antioxidant is, but they say you want them. So I was always taught in school, that oxygen was what you want, but apparently not. So you learn something new every day on the Beantown Podcast. How do you like that? And now we are going to be joined live from Indiana. The man, the myth, the legend himself, the commissioner. Maybe knows Michael Chiklis, maybe he doesn't. Hunter Bolin joining us live. How are you doing today, Hunter?
Doing good. Appreciate the introduction there, Quinn. Quite an outstanding delivery.
Well, that's what you want to hear. We are going to be talking fantasy football right now. Hunter, why don't you tell us a little bit about Wrigleyville Dawgs?
Sure, absolutely. So that's obviously the league that Quinn partakes in. He had a wonderful podcast last year, kind of talking about fantasy football. So I figured I'd hop on and join in on the conversation. Our league's an interesting one. It's people have rotated in and out through the years, but it's kind of a funky system. We got auction drafts, we got shenanigans, we got loser, punishments, and all that good jazz. So
I didn't even know we had loser punishments.
you wouldn't. You've never. I don't think you finished in the bottom half ever. So
what's the punishment?
We got Connor is actually going to be doing it here in a couple weeks before his wedding. He's going to be chugging a beer and running a 40 right after.
Oh,
and we're
nice.
going to be timing him, and his time will go up on a nice plaque, a nice loser 40-yard dash plaque. So
who had to run that last year?
Well, so this was instilled, ending like the beginning of last year.
Okay.
So whoever lost last season was going to do it. My brother Connor Bolin, got last place, so he'll be doing it, and we're going to do it. We're going to do it live. We're going to video it, so all the rest of the Wrigleyville Doggers will get to see it.
Wow.
So it'll be fun. Mm-hmm.
That might be the least extreme loser punishment I've ever heard.
It's not too bad, but have you ever heard of the beer mile? You ever had to go on a track, you chug a beer, you run a 400 meter, you chug a beer, you run a 400 meter, until a mile, so 4 laps. Have you ever had to do that?
I never have. No, I tend not to lose things.
Yeah,
so
you tend to avoid those stupid bets and dares.
Yeah. Well, thankfully,
well,
it's just 40 meters, so that's a little bit less than 1,600.
Exactly. Well, as we've gotten older and fatter, 1,600 meters sounded like I'm not sure half the group could run the mile, let alone
I think
drink
you're right.
beer with it. So 40 meters seemed just just for the cause. Plus, we get to all see everybody's anybody who loses, we get to see their 40 time and how much slower it is than it was probably back when they were 16, 17, 18
definitely.
years old.
Yeah, the big question here, and then we'll start talking some players here. What type of beer does he have to drink?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I feel like the group should decide. Maybe it's a Guinness, maybe something heavy.
I was thinking Guinness. That's good. I'm thinking we find. So my parents live out in Oregon, and there's a brewery out there, Deschutes, and occasionally they'll brew some real wild ones that have super high percentages, like 12 or 13. I think we ought to get a tall boy one of those and just let him loose.
Oh man, I mean, if it's easy to get a hold of, do they ship it?
Oh, I'm sure you could find something local that does something similar to that.
Yeah, it should be disgusting. That's for sure. It should definitely be something that you don't enjoy doing and is going to be hard to choke down. So I definitely put it in consideration.
We should give Connor the option of either chugging the beer or taking a double shot of Malort.
Oh, God. I don't think anybody would choose that. Would you choose that, Quinn? Double Malort?
No, but it might be fun.
Yeah. For people who've never had it, they might think, that's not as bad.
I mean, it's basically gasoline. Yeah.
It's gasoline.
It's fuel.
Typically, I know you're up there in Chicago now. That's Malort's, hometown. We used to prank people all the time with that. Everybody would get Fireball shots. I got a round of Fireball shots for everybody. You'd order all of them except for one. You'd ask for Malort, and one unlucky son of a bitch would get it. So
that's pretty devious. Yeah. Oh boy. Not sorry I missed those parties. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into some fantasy football here. We've got some hard-hitting questions. We've got some rapid fire. We're gonna cover a lot of ground here in a pretty short amount of time because it's Sunday and I want to go do stuff. And the Vikings play tonight, playing the Seahawks. I got to put on my Donovan McNabb jersey. Get ready for that game. Okay.
Yeah. Who knows? He might be starting tonight, right?
I mean, what is it?
Make
The
a guest
Eagles.
appearance?
The Eagles signed. Do you see they signed McCown? I think he came out of retirement to sign with the Eagles.
I didn't see that, but I believe it. I would believe it 100%. That guy is still. He's Mr. Team USA. He'll go wherever.
Yeah, I haven't completely followed. I suppose I could just look it up, but obviously the Eagles are having quarterback injury problems. But I'm not sure like how severe it is in terms of length of time. Like, is Carson Wentz out for a significant amount of time, or is he just like resting because it's preseason? Yeah. I haven't actually read up. I don't know what their situation is, but
well, that's a good point. I mean, if just looking at some of these mock drafts that I've done and just seeing where Carson Wentz is going, it's kind of crazy. Like these kind of consensus, like somewhere in like the 4 to like 7, 8 range. It's like that's pretty high up there for a guy that hasn't, has had one flashy season and then has been riddled with injuries. So I don't know. We'll see. Definitely smart of the Eagles to pick up, a somewhat of a veteran quarterback that had success with swinging in a backup and winning a Super Bowl. So I'm guessing that's strategy.
Yeah, Carson Wentz is the type of player where unless I still probably won't because I've never really like had him on a team, so I don't really trust him yet. But I can't imagine going into week 1 and having Carson Wentz like be your starting quarterback on a fantasy team. I'd rather get me somebody like Jameis Winston or Goff or Russell Wilson or something and have, take Carson Wentz. And if he goes in the, 6th, 7th, 8th round, then there's no way I'll ever have him on my team. But I don't know. I don't think, at least in the league I play in where we do a snake draft, I don't think that he's going to be going all that high.
Too early.
Especially because, I play, this is the 14th year of my family league. And so we've got managers who have seen the greatness of Brady, of Rodgers, of Phillip Rivers. So, even though Carson Wentz is probably a better option than, Tom Brady or probably Drew Brees this year, you're not going to be able to convince these old-timers who have seen the Brees numbers, seen the Brady numbers, that you should take a flyer on this guy who has injury problems. So I think he's going to fall in a lot of leagues. But that's just my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I could agree with you. I mean, it's typically you're either don't ever draft a quarterback till 8th, 9th on rounds, or you go after the Mahomes, the Watsons, the Rodgers, those guys. So that's just kind of how it rolls with quarterbacks.
This is true. Well, we'll be talking a little bit about quarterbacks later. Not a ton today, but we do have a couple points on them. Let's jump into our first big topic of discussion. So, when I've been doing mock drafts, I actually already know in my league where we do a snake draft, I'm drafting 9th, and that tends to be a spot when I'm drafting where it ends up being like, I usually end up with some combination of Nick Chubb and or James Conner and then Julio Jones and or sometimes Odell, sometimes occasionally Devontae Adams, not super commonly. But to me, there's pretty much no way that I'm taking 2 running backs with my first 2 picks just because the value tends to not be there. So when it swings back to me, 2 hours later, you got a lot of mid-round running backs, and some of them are getting really hyped up. Some of them people aren't really talking about as much, but they were guys who performed really well last year. So I'm just going to throw a couple names at you, and I just want to kind of get a feel for your perspective on these guys. These guys who are most drafts I've been playing in or mocking in have been going in like the 4th or 5th rounds. So the first one here, Josh Jacobs, rookie for the Oakland Raiders, which we're going to be talking about the Raiders more moving forward here. But what's your perspective on this rookie running back?
Yeah, I mean that's I think he that's probably one of the top ones on the charts in terms of rookies. I mean he's got the role. It's his to to do with what he wants. There's some hype around the Raiders. You got what is it, Hard Knocks are over there on HBO that's been giving them all the exposure. You got Antonio Brown, all his goofy stuff. So, it's brought on a lot of, I think it's impacted the team quite a bit. Obviously Gruden's out there and he's got nothing but good words for Josh Jacobs. But, to me, I try to avoid all that stuff. I just go with, the hard facts. What do I see? Kind of the eye test. And that first preseason game he played, I actually, saw all the highlights of it. Obviously, I didn't sit down and watch a Raiders game. But it was, he did look explosive. I'd say that the biggest kind of takeaway I had from him and watching him was he seems extremely well-rounded. He seems like a guy that's going to be involved in the passing game. He's going to be able to, I think, take the workload of a three-down back. And for somebody like Derek Carr, who, he's not really known anymore for the deep pass, I think Josh Jacobs is going to be a really big. I think he's rising on everybody's, rankings. I'll look up here. I'm not sure where he's set at the moment, but like you said, 4th, 5th round. I guess he's set around 16th, right around Chris Carson, which is another mid-round guy. But you get a rookie. That's always an interesting pick. I think that they've said. I was listening to some stats the other day. Rookie running backs that actually start, get the starting role as a team in the last, I think it's 7 years. There's been 50% of them have been in the top 5, which is crazy. Like how is that possible? But I think it's just when you're given the opportunity and it's your entire backfield, you don't have to worry about a running back by committee team. Then I think it's look at all these guys that have maybe less talent that have really surged up. A James Conner, Damian Williams, I think so. I think he's got a good opportunity to finish, in that top 10.
Do you have any concerns about the fact that he plays for the Raiders, who also are in a division with the Chiefs and Chargers, two very high-scoring offenses, and the fact that I believe Jalen Richard is still around, and in the past he's kind of been the pass catcher out of the backfield for the Raiders. Haven't seen anything or heard anything that tells me that I think the Raiders are actually going to be a successful product this year. So my concern with a guy like Josh Jacobs is I think he just gets game scripted out of games very frequently.
Yeah, it's definitely a risk, hence why he isn't getting, up there in the top 10 running backs. But I think that, with Gruden, he's an old school guy. I think he's going to want he's going to want one guy. He's going to want a workhorse. And I think Josh Jacobs at this point shows that he can do it. I mean, again, we haven't seen a whole lot from him, but I think that they're going to put it to the test. He might have to roll into it, like you said. I think, whoever it is, Jalen Richard or whoever, he might start the season getting some work, but I think that as time goes on, Josh Jacobs will be their 3-down guy, their workhorse, the guy they get the ball to the most. So it doesn't concern me a whole lot, but I definitely agree with you that, as much as we've seen for the Raiders, I don't think they're in a tough division, tough defensive division, and I don't think that they're going to, rise to the top or anything.
Sure. One guy you mentioned was Chris Carson for Seattle, and I'm actually going to lump him in with Phillip Lindsay from Denver. Mm-hmm. Two guys who I mysteriously and magically rode to a championship last year in Wrigleyville Dawgs. I don't know how it happened. Yeah. Those were just two guys who pretty much came out of nowhere, and I was lucky enough to get both of them on my roster. These are two running backs who, if you just followed them or had them last year, you know how money they were when they were healthy and when they were playing. But they're not getting a lot of press this year. I'm not sure. I think Lindsey, because he just had some like freak touches where he was scoring a lot on a limited amount of touches, and then Chris Carson with his knee problems. How do you size those two guys up this year?
Yeah, I mean those are two both. I mean both of those guys are mid-round running backs that I think you can get some value out of. I do hold Chris Carson much higher than Philip Lindsay, simply in the fact that I think that Chris Carson has showed that he can, that he's explosive, that he caught passes. He's been catching passes from the running back position all his life, and I think they just didn't involve him enough last year. And last year he was, I believe he was a top 20 guy, on a team that runs the ball quite a bit. I mean, Pete Carroll, we all remember the pass, to lose them the Super Bowl, but they were a Marshawn Lynch, carry them through the season kind of team, and Pete Carroll, I think he still extends that way, and I think Chris Carson, last year was kind of an upgrade, I think that he showed that he could do it. So I do really like Chris Carson. The only concern is can he remain healthy? I mean, I know he's missed games about every year he's played, but for a mid-round running back who has the upside of maybe a top 12 guy, definitely worth the value. Lindsey's kind of he's kind of a dark horse. He was last year, and I can remember when you picked him up on waivers because that's the only place anybody would have had him. He was unbelievable. He did win people championships, and I think he's got a remarkable story there. He's only 5'6" or 5'8", something like that. Just unbelievably small. Would never think he could make it in the NFL. Not being Darren Sproles kind of player. Skill set. But, he's explosive. He shows, time and time again that he can do it. But I do think that NFL teams have trouble trusting that. They worry very much about the injury concerns. So I think a Royce Freeman, them having a Royce Freeman over there, I think that they're going to split a lot of time. And I do think he's still going to be phenomenal. He's going to be an Alvin Kamara kind of player, that gets about 40 to 50% of the carries, but, makes so much out of them. But I don't think he has the upside of, of being a top 10 guy just because the simple fact that, he is smaller, and I don't think he's going to get the work that we think maybe he deserves.
Yeah, and I mean, if Flacco's throwing, 55 touchdowns this year, there's only so many points to go around.
That's right. Yeah, you homer. That's right. I forgot. You're a Joe Flacco Baltimore guy, right?
Not necessarily, but for the sake of time, sure. I got one other running back here, and then we're going to shift gears. This guy's been just skyrocketing up the ADP. Kerryon Johnson from the Detroit Lions is a guy that I find myself drafting fairly often, and he's showed some flashes. I still have this burning sensation, it's not gonorrhea, it's in my mind, where I don't know what the stat is, there's something out there, but the Detroit Lions running back hasn't had eclipse some statistical thing that everyone else has in however many years.
Yes.
That's what concerns me. So how do you feel
that.
about Kerryon Johnson, all that being said?
Yeah, so you are right about that, and kind of I'll lump him with a Josh Jacobs potentially, in the sense that kind of when we had the concerns of Oakland being a bad team or not a good team, the Lions have not been a good team since the Calvin Johnson era. So you look at the Lions don't run the ball, they don't ever run the ball, and they got a tough division, one of the toughest in my opinion, and they're not a team that you typically want to ride the running back on. Now, I think Kerryon Johnson is unbelievably talented. I think he's one of the better running backs. I put him up there with a Joe Mixon, Devonta Freeman when he was healthy, maybe even like a David Johnson-esque player. He's unbelievable. But I do think that, similarly with the concerns of Josh Jacobs, there's a good chance that he could get scripted out quite a bit. Now, big news for the Lions when they lost Theoretic is that, he should be that third down guy now. But, I still don't, where he's going now makes me concerned because I would have loved him, at like I don't know, beginning of the fourth, maybe end of the third. I mean, he was a value there, but now he's going middle third, top third, end of the second. And it's like, that is so hard to rely on a Detroit Lions running back, regardless of how talented the guy is, to get that value. I mean, you're telling me he's got to finish in the top, 12 running backs for you to get your value? That's very scary for me.
Yeah, I am with you all the way. Again, early mock drafts, I'm doing them in like February and stuff. Kerryon Johnson, good value, and boy, he's climbing pretty high right now, and it scares me.
It makes me nervous for sure. Because I would have loved the guy. I got him, I'm with you. I drafted beginning of summer here, started some mocks, and you could get him fourth round, and you were like, holy cow, starting running back, completely talented guy, but now getting him that early, I think I will avoid him unless he drops, end of the third, beginning of the fourth, which just won't happen at this point.
Yeah, I wanted to shift gears to talk about a specific group of players, but actually right before I get there, you mentioned a player's name who I have absolutely no idea how to feel about this year, and if he dropped to me at number 8 in the first round, I'm not sure what I would do. David Johnson is extremely talented. He also plays for the Arizona Cardinals, and I don't care if you have Kyler Murray. I'm sure he's going to be an upgrade. I'm sure they'll win some more games. I still think the Arizona Cardinals are an awful team, and I don't – based off of what we saw from David Johnson last year when he, I think, was healthy and the Cardinals were just terrible, was nowhere close to being a first-round draft pick. So I'm wondering what your – sort of perspective is on him, where you think he should be drafted.
Yeah, no, David Johnson's an interesting one. So I just recently did it. We had our inaugural dynasty draft here with some other guys, and I got David Johnson at an unbelievable value in my draft, so it was hard to pass up. But I was still extremely nervous in the same regards that you're talking about. We've kind of mentioned several of these guys that, are good running backs on bad teams. And bad teams don't produce top, 10 running backs very often, if ever. So, last year was an exception even for David Johnson because in a half point he did finish as the 10th running back. So if you're in a 10-man league, he's a first-round draft pick. But people were drafting him, third, fourth, so you hurt a little bit when you're when you get on the clock and you got the fourth pick in the draft and you take David Johnson. It hurts when he comes in 10th, even though he finishes the top 10. So at 8 it makes me nervous. It's it's unlikely that he's going to fall to that first part of the second round. And I think he's a strong RB1. I think there's better guys up there. I mean, it's, I think you can kind of what you've talked about, you could probably set yourself up a little bit better with, potentially a Le'Veon Bell, if you need a running back, maybe even a James Conner, one of those guys that might get you in like the 11th, 12th, or shift gears and start with a receiver and pick up some of these other, running backs that go in the second, third round that I think are going to be, top producers.
Sure, and again, you brought up another name, and you're basically doing the segueing for us. You're a natural. We're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, but not the actual team. We're going to be talking about guys who used to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And there are two, of course, very big names, and then there's a third one that's not as sexy, but still interesting nonetheless. So let's start off right there. Le'Veon Bell plays for the New York Jets.
At this point, yeah.
And here's a little bit of my concern. So Le'Veon Bell is a very distinct running style. He likes to hop around in the backfield, a lot of lateral motion. When he held out last year and James Conner came into the Steelers and had an unbelievable season, what that kind of set off in my mind was, yeah, maybe Le'Veon Bell is really talented, but maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers just have the perfect run game scheme. And now I see Bell going to a much worse offense, even if I don't know much about the Jets' offensive line, to be honest. But they just the team as a whole hasn't done a lot recently, and I'm not confident in their quarterback play. I see Le'Veon Bell going, 4th, 5th overall picks. I can't imagine. I don't want anything to do with that early on. He's probably the one player we're going to talk about today where I have the strongest feelings.
Yeah,
but I'm interested
in
your insights into Le'Veon Bell this year.
Yeah, so I think this is probably where we differ a little bit, just in the sense that I think that the Jets, watching Sam Darnold a little bit here, watching the offensive lineman upgrades that they've had, I think the Jets as a whole have gotten better. I don't think that this is the year that the Patriots collapse, or I don't think that the Jets are going to be a team to take the mantle, but I do think that they've had significant improvement, and I think that what comes with that is a running back that I agree is more shifty than and dynamic than he is explosive, but I think he's going to be such a value to Sam Darnold. I think when we talk about these running backs that do finish in the top 5, all of them catch over 60 passes a year, or at least thrown to 60 times. I mean, it's just essential to be a part, maybe except for Zeke, his rookie season, but everybody else catches passes. I mean, that's what made David Johnson unbelievable that year. He tried to go for 1,000 and 1,000. It's what makes an Alvin Kamara, a Saquon Barkley. So I think Le'Veon Bell, with his skill set and with Sam Darnold looking, again, we're talking about some preseason games we've watched and some rumors we've heard, but he's looked a lot better. He looks more comfortable. And I think that makes, and where do you go to, when you are under pressure? The running back. And Le'Veon Bell has proven in the, 5-6 years on the Steelers there that, he can be that role. He was the target for Big Ben when he was in trouble, and, look where that got him. So I think he's going to be a bell cow, I do, for the Jets, and I think they're going to be an upgrade on the team. So I think he does fall, hot take here, I think he does fall top 5 for sure.
Well, I'd be concerned about Leon Washington coming out of retirement and grabbing some of those carries, but hey, we'll see what happens.
yeah, you never know. Opportunity is there for anyone. They actually don't they? I believe they've got Ty Montgomery. I think I saw the other day.
Oh, really?
I saw they were watching, and what is it? Adam Gase, isn't he their coach now? Was talking about how Ty would cut it. Ty would be a huge asset on the team. So maybe you're right. Maybe Le'Veon, splits time with guys and runs a totally different program. But with the money they've spent, I don't think that's, as a coach, I don't think that's how you keep your job typically. So, we'll see. But that's my take on Le'Veon for sure.
Is Ty Montgomery the guy who was a wide receiver and then one day Mike McCarthy just decided he was going to be a running back?
Yes, that's exactly him. I think he's 6 foot, he was 6 foot 185 or 195, and they're like, yeah, you're gonna be a running back. So now he is. Yeah,
2017 was a crazy time.
Yeah.
Okay, the other big name, but other big ex-Steeler who's been in the news for pretty much all the wrong reasons. He's fighting with Josh Gordon for all the negative publicity.
That's right. Yeah,
Antonio Brown, who cryogenically froze his feet. I haven't drafted him in a mock draft, and I've probably done 25-ish, because he would always go before I would even think about it. And I think we're usually talking somewhere in the third is what I've been seeing typically. I want nothing to do with it, and my argument is kind of the same way I felt about Le'Veon Bell, where I thought scheme-wise maybe he benefited a lot from the Steelers' offense. I just don't think Carr is that great anymore, and I worry. I don't know. I think Antonio Brown could put up some good numbers, but for the ADP that he's at right now, I just don't trust it at all. What's your take on Antonio Brown?
Yeah, no, I'm on your side 100% on that guy. Antonio Brown is a liability. I mean, we're not just talking about two NFL teams. I think to fantasy owners, he's one of the best receivers, one of the most talented receivers the NFL has seen. I really do believe that. I mean, the guy's 5'10", and he absolutely shreds the field like he's 6'7". But I think, he's going to a team that I've mentioned, that we've mentioned several times, but even that I mentioned with Derek Carr, he doesn't throw the ball downfield. It's, I think I read something the other day, he might be the lowest, if not bottom 4 in, yards in the air. You're going to Antonio Brown's going from a team where Big Ben was, top 5 at air yardage to the bottom 5. I mean, that to me, that's a really bad sign. Antonio Brown is not a guy that, you just feed the targets to. He's a monster. Give me a 60-yard touchdown catch, and then we're going to come back and hit you on a 20-yard post, and so. No, he very much, and then you got all these off-field problems. He very much makes me, he's a big no-no for me. I wouldn't draft him anywhere near the value that people are holding him to. So, he hasn't fallen on any of my teams, and I'm okay with that at this point.
Yeah, the one other, I have a surprise one as well, but the one other actual guy is someone who used to be kind of fantasy darling maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, and now is just pretty much as irrelevant as you can get. And I'll expand this to the Denver wide receiving core in general, but Emmanuel Sanders, and then I guess by extension Cortland Sutton, and I don't even know who else Denver has on their receiving core. Also, side note, who does Demaryius Thomas play for?
That's a great question. Probably still in recovery, right? From last year, I don't know.
Yeah.
That guy, I think there's some teams that could probably use him, but, there's always the fear of, of just another injury, just another issue. So, I don't know. That's a good question. We'd have to look that up.
Are you wanting anything to do with the wide receivers over at Denver? Obviously, Flacco, 55, 60 touchdowns this year. They're going to someone. Have you been interested by either Sutton or Sanders in any of your drafts?
Yeah, so, I mean, I know we mentioned it, the old ex-Steeler, you said there, Emmanuel Sanders, who has been, a remarkable guy to have on your fantasy team. He's always been a value. About every year he goes in like the 4th round, and he's finishes like a top, 20 guy. So he's always been a value. But, I think he's had 2 big ankle injuries that have reduced his mobility. They keep giving him a chance because I don't think they don't really have anybody else over there. But I think he's another kind of liability guy. I think he will be used quite a bit. But I just don't think, I think you got to scout him out for maybe 12 to 14 games. 14, I think, at the most. So he's a guy I'm avoiding. I mean, if we're talking like back end of the draft, I don't, I kind of just want to fill some pieces. He's an okay guy. I actually put him around Larry Fitzgerald. I think that both those guys this year are kind of these veterans. They've been in the league for a long time. I think they're reliable, but you can't expect anything flashy from those guys anymore. I think they're just some, low end, baseline guys that you could grab. So definitely not high up on him. And I think Denver as a whole, I think with Flacco, how much he passes to the tight ends. I think, whoever's over there, who is it? Even the tight end over it. I think he might get a bump up, but the rest of them, I'm typically avoiding till like the real late rounds.
Yeah, I have no idea who Denver's tight end is.
Noah Fant? Is that correct? Noah Fant. I don't know. See, that's what I mean. So Denver's, if you can't tell, Denver, I'm not super high on with anybody. I think Lindsey's going to get time cut with Royce. I think the receiving core is just not, I don't think they have any superstars, and I think they're going to struggle. I think defensively is where they're, that's where they're going to key in on.
Yeah, fair enough. One other ex-Steeler and one ex-Viking as well. What do you think Mike Wallace is doing these days?
Hey, how about Mike Wallace? What's he up to anymore? He's still catching 40-yard touchdown receptions or 81 yards?
Yeah, definitely not.
Hasn't he been? He's been all over. Wasn't he an Eagle, a Raven?
He ended up in Baltimore at some point, I think.
Yeah.
But
I gotta remember him in a lot of purple jerseys. I think is what I remember him at. So hell, take him late if he's still playing. Just for this nostalgia purposes. I would go Steve Smith. Hell, I'll put him on my team.
Ooh, Steve Smith. Which one? The Panthers legend or the Super Bowl winning Giants receiver?
I was thinking Panthers, but hell. Maybe we go real deep on the team.
Well, there's your 14th and 15th round picks.
Then Steve Smith, he's coming out of the woodworks here.
All right, let's kick it up a notch here. Let's do a little rapid fire action. We're not going to be elaborating. We're just getting right to the point, and then we've got I think 2 other segments that we'll get to. So rapid fire. This is going to move fast. So I hope everyone at home is ready. We're going to do 4 different positions here, and it's just which one do you think is going to have a better year fantasy wise? Matt Ryan or Jameis Winston?
Matt Ryan.
Okay. Wide receivers: Allen Robinson or Alshon Jeffrey?
Alshon Jeffrey.
Running backs: Nick Chubb or James Conner?
James Conner.
Okay, and then the least exciting one: O.J. Howard or David Njoku?
O.J. Howard.
Mm-hmm. People have been saying David Njoku is going to be his year for like 25 years now.
This is his rookie season. Man, he's just so electric. He's so athletic. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, have not. I don't know how many 10+ point fantasy games he's had, but it can't be that many. He seems like he's good to get you 3 or 4 most weeks, and then occasionally 1 and occasionally 11. And I guess that's kind of how tight ends go in general, but you can probably do a little bit better if you're.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even at the very back ends of the rounds, you can still pick up guys, that are a much better value in my opinion. I mean,
yeah.
Delaney Walker, hell, we're talking about some ancients. I think Delaney Walker is a value guy. Kyle Rudolph, your boy over there at Minnesota, I think he's a big one too. So, yeah, I think I would avoid both of those guys. Yeah,
the top, there are the 3 big tight ends this year, Kelsey, Ertz, and Kittle. And then after that, it's pretty, I won't call it barren, I'll call it murky. And to me, it's just unless I have a certain tight end in mind that I really want, I'm probably not even going to bother with that position until, I don't know, 8th, 9th round or something, just because there are going to be so many guys who will probably finish very similar to each other stats-wise, and I don't think I need to jump on one of them, unless there's somebody I really like, which right now there isn't. So
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. Okay, I was hoping we weren't going to have to talk about this on August 18th, but we're still here. 2 slam dunk first-round picks, running backs, are still holding out and nowhere to be seen. Ezekiel Elliott and Melvin Gordon. And so the strategy, I think, on this, or the perspective on where to draft these guys changes day by day as you get closer to the start of the season. But right now, August 18th, so opening kickoff is 2.5 weeks away. Are you still taking both those guys in the first round? Are you taking one but not the other? Neither? Where do you stand as of today on those two players?
Yeah, I mean that's the $1 million question at this point. I mean, I've seen such a variety of things in my mock drafts that it's hard to gauge. I mean, you've got to have, the way I've looked at it is look at the system in place. So we'll start with the Chargers. I think the Chargers have enough moving pieces that Melvin Gordon isn't a requirement for the team to be good. And I also say that because, the Chargers have no money. They really don't. I mean, they don't fill their stands. They can't manage to, when it actually, produce in LA, without their stadium and stuff. So they don't have the money to pay the guy. And so I think that's a huge, that to me drops Melvin Gordon almost off of my draft board. Because I think that, with all that in mind and what if you've heard in the news, he's not going to accept any of that. And, he wants the money, blah, 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 blah. It makes me way too nervous. So I do think that he's just too much of a risk. But, as we move to Zeke Elliott, I think it's a much different scenario. So, I think that Zeke is necessary for the Cowboys to be good. I think that without him, they're a much worse team. That being said, Jerry Jones is this. I think he plays the hard-ass game of I don't, blah, blah, blah. I don't need to pay them. We'll find somebody, Tony Pollard is a beast. He can handle the workload. It's completely different scenario. There's not a Phillip Rivers over there. There's not a Keenan Allen. I mean, not really. I would consider Amari Cooper a Keenan Allen. They don't have the kind of defense that the Chargers have. So I think that Zeke gets paid, and so I'm still willing to take the risk of drafting him pretty early. He was number one going into this season for me with how many catches he had last year. We went from 40 attempts the year prior to 100, which is insane. I mean, that's just crazy for a guy that was already finishing in the top 5 without catching passes to catch that many. So he was my number one guy, even over Saquon. But with all this stuff, it's always just better to go with a little bit less or risk-adverse guys. So, I still think Barkley, McCaffrey, and Kamara are above him. But Zeke falls on my fourth pick.
Sure. What you said makes a lot of sense. Regarding that Chargers backfield, if you get to your draft and it's next week or the week after and there's been no updates on the Melvin Gordon situation and you want to take a Chargers back not named Melvin Gordon, would you rather draft Austin Eckler or Justin Jackson?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think, to me, you go with the value. Austin Eckler is rising. He's rising on boards, and it makes me nervous. I mean, I'm going to spend I think he's up to maybe the fifth round somewhere, 5th, 6th. That's kind of a high payment for a guy that is going to split time regardless. Austin Eckler doesn't have the ability to be a workhorse back. So, to get him, he's a Tariq Cohen on a less exciting offense, and to get him in the 5th round, no thanks. I don't want him. If he falls below that, then I'm considering it. But Justin Jackson is practically free. There's no risk to it. You just grab him in the 10th, 11th, 12th round, and you've got a guy that's going to get the ball. Quite a bit. I think he's slotted here at the 55th running back right now. And if the guy gets even half the carries, split with Austin Eckler, he's going to finish at 32. So you're talking about value. That's 20 spots on a guy that's 3. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, we'll say if you're drafting in a league that has 3 Northwestern alums, Justin Jackson will not be the 55th running back taken.
Yeah,
so just just beware of him showing up in the second round all of a sudden. Same with Clayton Thorson. Hey, look out, Eagles. Okay. We've got one last segment here. It's a pretty big one, but it's kind of all on you, Hunter, to just give us whatever insights you want to give us. So, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, each of those positions, one guy you think is going to do way better than their ADP currently, and then one guy you think is going to severely underperform their current ADP. So, 2 guys per position. The floor is yours.
Great. Okay. Exciting. I'll throw out for the quarterback. I'm going to throw out one that I think that last year he had a strong finish to the season, and that's Lamar Jackson. I think that he's slotted somewhere around like the 20th quarterback on the board. That's around Phillip Rivers, Kirk Cousins, Jimmy Garoppolo, Mitch Trubisky, and I think that the ability to run as a quarterback, as long as your league counts it the same, I think that value is just huge. We talk about like a Kyler Murray, a Josh Allen. Like, I think those guys are gonna just produce too much. In the red zone, they score a lot of touchdowns. They run a lot, and they just get so many yards off the run or scrambling that I think that it sets up a beautiful baseline for you. And if we look back at Lamar Jackson's college days, he was a bomb thrower. He loved to throw the ball deep. Now that comes with all sorts of interceptions, throwing in bad double coverage. I mean, the guy hasn't stepped up in the NFL, but I think that he's going to hit on a couple of those bombs. I mean, and then he's going to have a strong baseline with his running. I think that sets him up to be a top. I'm not saying he's jumping to like a top 5 or something, but I think he could finish top 12, top 10 for kind of like just based off his baseline of running the ball.
Yeah, I am not totally. So you've called me a homer in the past. I don't know. I think Lamar Jackson to me is still a guy that I'm not at the point where I want to draft him to be my starting quarterback. But if I could get him in the 12th round or something like that as my backup to a Clayton Thorson or a Joe Flacco, then I'm all for it. But you're right. Yeah. I mean, Josh Allen was a guy at the end of last year who was sneakily putting up really solid games because he was getting like 60 rushing yards and a touchdown, and his passing numbers were like 8 for 24 and 31 yards. But I mean, you're right, racking up those numbers on the ground. So yeah, I think that's fair insight.
Yeah, the quarterback one is definitely it's the fishy one for me. I mean, kind of like you've talked about, I don't like to take, I either go all in early, or I sit back and let everybody grab whoever they want. And, I would take a guy like Lamar Jackson. You can double up too. You can take a Phillip Rivers, Lamar Jackson, play the matchup. You can always stream. Jackson will be there on the waivers, so, often weeks. So, I think he's a plug-and-play kind of guy. But I think, finishing the season, he has his numbers, just like you said with Josh Allen. He could finish the top 12 guy.
All right. Who's a quarterback you're not really feeling this year?
I mean, we kind of mentioned it just briefly. I think Wentz scares me. Andrew Luck scares me. I don't like these injury guys because, they're out a couple weeks and, you're scrambling. So.
Yep. I keep waiting for Andrew Luck to get better and haven't heard anything yet. It's scaring me with T.Y. Hilton as well. We could talk, I'm sure, for many more minutes about the Colts situation.
But every year with him. I mean, it's a package deal for sure.
Yep.
Luck plays, T.Y.'s a good value. That's simple.
Yep.
Just that easy.
Let's move to the running backs here. So same spiel. Who's a guy who's maybe being snubbed a little with his current ADP, who you think is just going to have a great year?
So I think I could could throw up several contested guys, but I think the one I'm going to go with is Miles Sanders for the Eagles. I think that, I got to watch some of their preseason game, and I think he's explosive. I think that he's what they've been wanting, when they try to get a Jay Ajayi, they've been looking for their guy for some time. And I think Miles Sanders might be that guy. I do think that he's got, he's a well-suited for their offense, and, reversing the scenario of Kerryon Johnson, a David Johnson, a Josh Jacobs. The Eagles are an incredible offense. They've got all the pieces they need. As long as Carson Wentz stays healthy, I think Miles Sanders is a huge value, and I think he's getting drafted around like the 28th running back, and I think he's going to finish well above that.
Does Jay Ajayi currently have a team, or?
I don't know. I can't believe he would be much value anywhere he's at. I mean, the guy's like basically walking around with one leg, so
yeah, that's fair.
Tough to make it in the NFL that way.
Who's a running back? We've already floated a lot of names, running backs wise. So it certainly doesn't have to be someone we have or haven't talked about. But who's somebody that's going a little bit too soon for you?
Ooh, too soon. Kerryon's definitely one, and I think. Hate to say this for you here, but Dalvin Cook.
Okay, we've had this conversation before. You know I'm not a Dalvin Cook person.
It's true. I know you're a Minnesota fan, but you've stuck by that. That's very honest. You've always been like, the guy is overhyped. So I think that he's taken like the first round, like 6th running back. So either he goes right after the receivers, or I've seen him right before now with some of these, with Zeke and Melvin Gordon. I've seen him taken before Adams. So, I don't like that value.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook is not Adrian Peterson, and we just haven't seen the Vikings offense completely put it together and stay at that functioning high level. They had it with Case Keenum.
Yeah,
and Dalvin Cook had some good stuff going there, but with Kirk Cousins, it's not the same. Not to say that Keenum's necessarily better or worse than Cousins or vice versa, but you throw Dalvin's knees into the mix, and you're right. If I can get him in the 3rd or 4th round, yeah, I'll do it. I'll take that risk. But drafting him in the beginning of the 2nd or the mid-2nd, where I've been seeing him going, man, I've just been burned a couple too many times with Dalvin, waiting for him to come back from injury or slotting him in when he's back, and then he's just a decoy. It's just he's way too high for me. I don't get it. So, yeah, I don't know.
I'm with you 100%.
All right, wide receivers. Who's someone that's looking a little juicy there for you, who you really like?
I think that it's kind of I would lump them all together. I think that I think getting a hold of a Rams wide receiver is about the best thing you could do. They all, finished in the top 20 receivers last year. That's Brandon Cooks, that's Cooper Kupp, and that's Robert Woods. All 3 of those guys are top 20 receivers that are all going in the same value of 20, 21, It's kind of crazy to me. Robert Woods might be the only one that's still kind of up there, but I think Cooper Kupp is maybe the biggest steal of those. I mean, I know he's battled some injuries. I know his ACL, but he was a touchdown monster. And in receivers, to me, typically that's what I look for. I like to look for guys that are consistent targets in the red zone from young quarterbacks. I mean, Jared Goff's still a young guy. I mean, he's only been in here a couple of years. He's got tendencies, right? He's going to throw to the guys that he thinks, are reliable. And so you look at all 3 of them, and I think any of them are good picks. But I think Cooper Kupp is that, him being the lowest value of all of them with the injury, I think he's got a huge value, huge upside, I should say.
So just straight up, which of those 3 wide receivers would you take first in the draft?
Straight up, Robert Woods, but, I think just he's too high right now, value-wise, a little too high for me.
Okay. Let's flip it around. Who's someone you're not feeling this year?
with receivers, but I think, we've talked about Antonio Brown. He scares me. And then the other one I throw in there, obviously we got T.Y. Hilton. He kind of scares me, obviously with Luck if Luck's not there, T.Y. is not going to produce at that top 10 receiver that people hold him to. So, I think both of those guys scare me because they're drafted so early, and I don't want anything to do with them.
Okay, very good. We're going to finish with a bang here, everyone's favorite category, tight ends.
Oh, boy.
Also a strip club in Boys Town. Yeah.
I got the names of all these tight ends. I'm going to throw a dart, and we're going to just throw a random name out that's going to be good.
And I probably heard of about half of them. So who's a guy? And I think we can, for this portion of it, exclude Ertz, Kittle, and Kelsey from the who's. Let's see, who do you really like? Because those guys are going in like the second and third rounds. So who's one of those guys now that's going, sixth round and later that you think could actually be top 5 tight end this year?
So I think the one that pops on my head is Trey Burton for my Chicago Bears team. I think that last year he was valued way too high on a new system that we hadn't seen. He was still... he was battling injuries all last year, so I think a lot of people are going to feel burnt by him. So he's getting dropped. I mean, he's getting picked up the last round of the draft. But I think he has big upside. I think the Bears are going to be a team that shuffles a lot of points around. I think that they're going to, I don't think they've got one guy. We look at a lot of these other teams, and I don't want to have the Hunter Henry. Because Keenan Allen's going to steal so many of those targets. I don't want a David Njoku because they've got too many heads to feed over there. I think that with Chicago, they don't have a superstar receiver. They really don't have a superstar running back necessarily. So I think that Trey Burton's going to see more value this year than he did last year.
Okay. And this might be a total shot in the dark, but who's a tight end you think is just not going to make it happen this year?
Well, so we'll just go right back to him. I think David Njoku he's picked as the 9th average. His average draft position is 9th on the tight end list, and I just do not see. Baker is not looking to shuffle an 8-yard pass to his tight end. He's wanting to go big. He's wanting to hit his running backs. Like Baker's, I don't think that he's out there like, let's get this little dump pass to David Njoku and let him run. So I think Njoku is. I think he's too high of a value.
Yeah. All right, boy. We got through it. What did we learn today? Don't draft David Njoku. No one needs Jay Ajayi or Melvin Gordon, and Quinn doesn't love Dalvin Cook. All right. I think we got
I love it. Yeah. Appreciate you having me on here, Quinn.
Yeah, do you let's do one other fun thing. I know we're both homers here, but one thing that I think anyone who follows the NFL knows is that it's seemingly impossible in recent years to repeat as NFC North champion. So
right.
in your best ability as an objective fan, what do you think is going to happen in the NFC North this year?
Damn, this is the hardest question. You saved it for the last, huh?
Oh yeah.
It's tough. I mean, I think that if you were looking at, just whoever's the most solid, I think the Bears are the most solid. I think the Vikings have the most upside to win the division. I think that they've got better pieces than the Bears do. It's just if they all come together, if Dalvin Cook can stay healthy, if he is that running back that they're taking on, if Kirk Cousins levels up being his second year there, if Diggs and Thielen stay healthy, if the Vikings defense, steps up, I think that the Vikings got a good shot. I think they have the best shot of winning the Super Bowl. We'll say that. I think the Bears are pretty solid everywhere, but, outside of their defense, offensively, they're not. It's nothing is just unbelievable. Like I said earlier, they don't have any superstars. So Trubisky, he needs to level up if they're going to even repeat last year's 12-4 season. So I think those two are the front runners, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a Bears fan and you're a Vikings fan. I think they are the two best teams in the NFC North. But, the Packers, you can never, ever, ever, I say this every year, especially, watching last year's first game when Aaron Rodgers goes out in the first half, getting sacked 4 times, he's injured, the Bears are up 23-0, and Aaron Rodgers comes back into the game and wins. You can never count that guy out. So, I don't think the Packers as a team have any chance, but Aaron Rodgers somehow pulls wins out of his ass. So, I won't count him out.
Yeah, the Packers, I feel like in NFC North games are always such a pain in the ass and impossible to kill. And then you watch them go to Washington or something and lose by 15 points, and you're just like, why couldn't you guys do this when we were playing you? They always
exactly
manage to lose the games that aren't exactly easy games, but just man, I don't know.
It never is. That's the whole division, though. I say that too about the Lions. I mean, I didn't include them because they're terrible, but I will bet you money that the Lions take a game away from at least the Bears. Bears, Vikings, Bears, Packers. They always manage to take 2 wins away from NFC North teams that need the wins. So, it's just a tough division. I do think it's the toughest in NFL at this current stage.
Yeah, they're kind of like your brother Tristan. They're never going to actually do anything, but they're just a pain in the ass regardless.
That's exactly right. Yeah, they're just annoying. Just annoying. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, any last parting thoughts here? We've gone on for a long time and taken up too much of your Sunday, so I apologize. But any last things you want to say to the 4 of us who are still listening?
No, I mean, it's been a pleasure to be on here. I love talking fantasy football. Always look forward to it every year. We go through these grueling spring, summer months, and you hear all this hype around every team. And once we get here, it's just incredible. So, I love talking about it. It's always good to get on and do some mock drafts, and it's just a lot of fun. So again, I had a good time here, and it's look forward to our auction draft coming up here September 1st.
Yeah, the Wrigleyville Dawgs League will be drafting 2 weeks from today, and the NFL season opens up the following Thursday. Headed by yours truly, defending champion, right. Show of handsome, Quinn David Furness, winning the Wrigleyville Dawgs League this past year.
Will you be the first to do it back to back? That's the
tough.
Big question.
We play in a pretty well enlightened league, so. For example, so when the whole Nick Chubb thing happened last year, which I think the kind of signal was they traded Carlos Hyde to the Jags. I was working that day, and by the time I got around, it had been 3 hours since the news broke, and I think Greg or something had picked him up. But
Greg
then in my family league, it was all quiet on the Western Front, and I picked him up, and I won the Super Bowl there too. So
there you go, double championships, man. That's unheard of.
Yeah, it was a magical year. 2 very different teams, right? One had Chris Carson and Lindsey, and another one had Tyreek Hill and Kamara and Nick Chubb and Zach Ertz and Baltimore. It's just there are multiple ways to win a championship, and luck is pretty much the only consistent factor.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, Hunter, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Absolutely, Quinn.
All right.
Take care, man.
All right. Thank you again to Hunter for coming on the podcast. That was excellent. Let's read some ads here, and we are super long. One of the longer episodes ever, which is fine because that was really good content. And if you are a fantasy football fan or player, I hope that was insightful for you because Hunter and I are not people who win every single year and always kick ass, but we've been playing the game for a long time. I know I've been playing, this will be my 14th year of fantasy football, and Hunter, I assume, is probably right around there as well. So we don't claim to know everything, but we do have some insight. Let's get to the ads here. Are you tired of selling your house for less than a quarter of what it's worth, all because you couldn't find a reliable home inspector in time? Well, Oregon listeners, there is good news. Home Pride Inspection Services in Bend, Oregon is Central Oregon's hottest new home inspection provider, with inspection services including things like heating and cooling, roofing, plumbing, and so much more. Home Pride Oregon is both contractor certified and home inspection certified, so you know you're getting the good stuff. If you're tired of big real estate stranglehold on the home inspection market and you want a safe, certified home inspector that you can trust, you better call Steve at 541-410-0316, or you could visit homeprideoregon.com. Again, that's 541-410-0316, or just head over to homeprideoregon.com. Home Pride Oregon. Inspection perfection. You got to say inspection with a certain inflection. 2 words that rhyme. You got to love it. And shout out, big day for the Samson Q2U series, double duty. Always love our friends at Samson, but even more on days when it's pulling double duty. I hope the audio quality, I haven't listened back to it yet, but I hope the audio quality worked out. We were doing FaceTime audio, and I think it sounded good. That's usually what we try to get to. And thanks again to John Paul Pendowski for his weather report. It feels like days ago, doesn't it? Shout out to Toward Curves, the clothing line, lingerie company. Again, hit me up if you want to do a partnership. Let's do our last ad read here. Again, Cuts by Q. That's me. You're talking to him. You're listening to him. If you're talking at me while you're listening to the podcast, people might think you're crazy. But I encourage it. We're all a little crazy. All right, bob and weave. We all know the hairstyle, and we all love it. But how many Chicago-based independent barbers can actually give it to you the way you deserve? Enter Cuts by Q. It's like Enter Sandman, but completely different. Cuts by Q has been independently owned and operated since 1995, and it's probably one of the better barbershop operations servicing Chicago, Cook County, and Chicagoland. From beehives to bangs, faux hawks to flat tops, and everything in between, just call Cuts by Q at 815-298-7200, or you can email. For those young kids out there who only do the emails, email cutsbyq@yahoo.com. Again, that's cuts. QUTZ by Q@yahoo.com. Oh, when you need a fresh do, something snappy and new, just call the experts at Cuts by Q. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward ad reads today. Thanks again to all of you friends of the podcast. Don't forget to use hashtag friends of the podcast. Thanks for listening to our 2019 fantasy football special. Really appreciate it. A lot of good nuggets in here. Again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can always email us, beantownpodcast@yahoo.com. Again, that's Beantown, BEANTOWN podcast@yahoo.com. Hey, if you want to do the weather report for our show next week, get in contact with us. It's real simple. All you got to do is record yourself for however much time you want, from 5 seconds to 5 minutes, giving us a detailed climate report about where you're at. We're talking temperature, cloud cover, humidity, heat index, UV index, visibility, soil, how it tastes, whatever you want to do. And if anybody speaks German and knows what John Paul said in his climate report, also shoot us an email, because I don't know, right? No clue. Haven't asked him, forgot about it. We'll see. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Good luck to all the fantasy football players out there as we approach our 2019 season. Remember, Steve Smith, there's 2 of them, so know which one you're drafting before you draft them. Heads up, they're both retired. Okay, for all of us here at the Beantown Podcast, thank you to Hunter Bolin, Commissioner of Wrigleyville Dawgs. Thank you to John Paul Pendowski. Welcome back to the North Side. And that's about all we got. So enjoy the rest of your weekend, and everyone have a great week, and we will see you next time.